All right, I'm anticipating some issues.
Hey guys, Alex here with Armadillo Armament. Today we are going to be discussing the Glock 45 Roland Special build that I've been working on the past couple months. Before we talk about this, I have partnered with Red Pawn Shop. For every item in your order, he will both plant a tree as well as remove 1 pound of junk from the ocean. I have patches of armadillos with quad nods and MCXs. They're really cool. If you use code Armadillo, you'll get 5% off your order. I'll get a small kickback. You're not only getting a really cool patch, you're saving the planet. All right, so if you know anything about me, you know that I love the Roland Special. My very first video on the channel was of the Roland Special. Actually, very close to this one, but with a MR920 slide and a different compensator. But I'm very passionate about the modern offensive handgun. I think Mr. Roland really knew what he was doing when he modified the Glock to turn it into, once again, this modern offensive handgun. And if you want to know a little bit about the history of the Roland Special, please go look at my other videos. Type in Roland, you'll see 3 or 4 of them, but I'm going to give you guys a really quick high-level overview. Basically, he believed that putting a compensator from KKM on your gun to remove the carbon from your X300, as well as potentially decrease recoil, we'll get into that, was a good idea. He also ran a X300 at the front, like so, and then he ran a RMR Type 2 or a Type 1, basically a early RMR, because dots just started becoming a little bit more of a thing. We weren't quite using, or we evolved past using like atom slides and 8.22s, and then adding a magwell, because once again, this is kind of a offensive fighting handgun and you want every advantage you can get. The magwell is going to push your hand higher up into the gun and maybe provide you a little bit more recoil reduction as well as aiding in recoil. Lastly, changing out the trigger and stippling the frame. And that was about it for the Roland Special. Once again, go watch my other videos if you want more information. But what's very interesting about that is that he went off of the Glock 19 firearm. This is a Glock 45. Now, if you don't know what a Glock 45 is, the Glock 45 is a Glock 19 sized barrel, right? But with a slightly longer grip. Now, he did make Roland Specials out of, he talks about in a podcast, a Glock 17 and then also a Glock 43. I'd love to see a video of that. That must be pretty funny looking. Kind of like my old 43X Roland, I have to imagine. But when I look at this concept, I say, okay, we have a very front-heavy Glock 19 with a massive compensator, which is phenomenal, and a massive X300 as well as a red dot optic. Now, for EDC use, having a 19 frame does make sense. Take a look at this MR920 frame. This is a 19 style grip, and I can very easily conceal carry this and get a full-size grip on the firearm. However, for a modern offensive handgun, I don't really care too much about size. And once again, I'm very capable of EDCing this. This is an LAS holster. But when you take a larger look at the platform, you say, well, if I want every advantage I can possibly get, why wouldn't I want it to be in a larger frame with a higher capacity? A Glock 45 is going to hold 17 to 18 rounds versus the 15 rounds you get in a Glock 19. That is nothing to scoff at. That is a little bit more ammunition, especially with a extension kicking out the bottom. You could easily get this to 20 rounds. On top of that, a larger frame is going to make it so it's going to be a little bit more comfortable, so my hands don't quite overhang off the bottom, like let's say a Glock 19, where my hands can get a little bit smushed near the bottom. And then furthermore, I have noticed that when I am drawing with a larger firearm, like let's say my USP or a full-size 1911 or this Glock 45, I find that a larger grip really does just allow me to grab the firearm easier and a little bit more consistently. As well as obviously having a larger and heavier frame is going to potentially work with or potentially lower the recoil of the platform. Because think about it, you're getting more hand on the firearm. So that was the entire concept of the Glock 45 Roland Special. This started out as me just wanting to have a Glock 45 with a TLR7 and no comp. It would look very similar to this. And I'll put a picture on the screen right now. And just having it as a EDC tool, but it evolved into the Roland Special because, well, I guess everything I make eventually evolves into a Roland Special, realistically. But I'm going to go top down on the firearm and explain to you the choices I've made, as well as really why I recommend it and just the experiences that I've had. So, starting at the top, we have a Acro P2. I'm going to have a much larger review on this, and I'm not going to give you guys my full endorsement quite yet, just because I believe that with optics, you need, really with almost everything you review, you should have at least 1,000, 2,000 rounds. But furthermore, you need to have a lot of reps just doing things with it. For example, I go to the gym, and a lot of the times I will throw a gun in my gym bag. Or when I'm going to the range, I will throw it kind of shamelessly into a mag or a bag of a bunch of other like magazines where it's just going to get bumped around. I think that's an important data point because I can pull from that and say, well, this thing has been knocking around my gym bag and knocking around my whatever bag for a couple months and I've seen no issues. I've carried it and I've seen no issues, and I've done drop tests and done mud and winter testing and I haven't seen any issues. I can confidently tell you that the Acro P2 is slowly becoming one of my favorite dots. It has not let me down whatsoever. I did have to send one back, which I will be discussing with you. Don't worry, there wasn't anything wrong with it. But suffice to say, I think the Acro is a phenomenal dot, and once again, it is becoming one of my favorite dots. This pistol started life as their Tallow Edition Glock 45. So what that means is you can actually buy a combination of a Glock 45, so everything here, with a Acro direct mounted, not using a plate system. That's very important, with co-witnessing iron sights, and you can get that from a lot of different companies. Red Team Armory is one of them that I highly recommend. I'm not affiliated with them. He has some of the best customer service I've ever worked with in the industry, and I really recommend you look there if you are looking to make a purchase on a new firearm. But this gun, like I said, started out as a Tallow Edition firearm. And the reason I bring that up is because this Acro is direct mounted, and once again, that is realistically the superior mounting platform. A direct mounted optic is just going to be the most secure. I really like the idea of plate systems on my optic, so I can change things out. Take a look at this GGP upper, phenomenal upper. However, a direct milled optic for a RMR or a Acro is just going to lock it in. I've had a great experience with this, and if you are interested in making this build, I don't recommend you buy a Glock 45 and do everything to it. I recommend you buy the Tallow Edition Glock 45. So, the Acro, it's great, guys. I will have a review in the next coming weeks. Really quick note before we go forward, the Acro is obviously known for kind of looking like a mailbox. A lot of people have memed on it, so I think it's Vulcan Machine Works. They make a little sticker that turn it into an actual mailbox. And if that's not hilarious, I don't know what is. Now, moving down the firearm, I do have co-witnessing iron sights, once again, from that Tallow Edition. And then moving forward, we have the linchpin of the entire conversation, the entire build. Now, if you have more questions on the Roland Special, I really recommend you look at my other videos. But this is what is called a KKM compensator. It's made by KKM Industries, and they make some of the nicest compensators and nicest barrels on the planet. For pistols, that is. Probably rifles, too. The KKM compensator we're going to need to talk about, and that's going to be a large part of this review, because it is one of the most aggressive comps on the planet, which is good. But that comes with some downsides. The KKM comp is what is known as a dual channel comp. So at the top front of the compensator, you will see dual ports. You'll also see side ports as well. Now, a lot of companies will use single ports because it is going to redirect gas upwards only through that single port, and you may not need to change something like a recoil spring. KKM uses a dual port system, and you can make larger single ports that may compensate for that, but KKM uses, like I said, their dual port system, which means you really are getting extremely significant recoil reduction. And what that's going to do is it is going to slow down the slide, and it is going to dribble the rounds out. It is going to increase your recoil reduction by, I'm just guessing, 30-40%. However, the downsides of that are you may be running a more finicky system. Now, to move back to a different Roland Special I had, my Glock 43X Roland, that was using the PMM micro compensator. That is a single port compensator. You can find that on PMM's website. It was phenomenal. It ran with any 115 grain ammo, and even from the beginning, I had almost zero malfunctions. The only malfunctions I would fairly consistently see would be failure to lock back, which is fairly common with comped guns. The KKM compensator, I will put a video on the screen in a moment, but the initial 100 to 200 rounds of this was awful. I could not get through more than 2 to 3 rounds without having a stovepipe or a failure to feed, and I attribute that to the barrel needing to kind of be broken in.
All right, I'm anticipating some issues. Failure to feed. Does that have a muzzle flash on the top of it? It's a compensator.
Do we restart the video?
Nope. Failure to feed. Failure to feed. Failure to lock open.
KKM makes very precise barrels, some of the best barrels on the planet, and Mr. Roland, the man behind the build, used that because he wanted that superior accuracy on the platform. Once again, the reason to bring that up is because they are so precision fit and precision machined, I have to imagine that they needed that break-in period to really get adjusted to the ammunition I was using. What ammunition was I using? Well, a couple different things. I was running 115 grain ammunition and 124, and then 124 kind of NATO spec, and then self-defense ammo. A majority of the malfunctions that I had, which once again was every round or two, completely unusable for a self-defense firearm, would be in the 115 grain weaker ammunition. Comped guns generally like 124 grain, and especially 124 grain plus P. If you are not pushing a fast round down the barrel, your compensator really isn't doing much, right? Because the gases created by that plus P ammunition is going to, redirect upwards and push the gun downwards. Now, if you are not having a extremely high powered round, or not an extremely high, but at least a relatively NATO spec round, the slide just isn't going to have the oomph to really completely reciprocate or push that round back into the chamber, right? And that's what's going to cause a lot of malfunctions, as well as you will find you will get significantly higher recoil reduction the higher the ammunition goes. Now, once I got through about 200 rounds with the 115 grain and all hope was lost, everything did start to get a lot better. Even with the 115 grain on a stock recoil spring, I was able to eventually get through close to a mag without having a malfunction. I did move over to Norma 124 grain, kind of NATO spec stuff, and I had maybe a handful of malfunctions in about 500 rounds. It's important to note I have about 700 rounds on this configuration. Prior to putting the KKM comp, my Glock 45 had about 300 to 400 rounds. I'm going to go on a small tangent here. I don't normally review firearms unless I have 2,000 to 3,000 rounds on it, but the way I look at it is this is going to be a continued evaluation over the next coming months and the next coming years, and I want to give you guys this information, so as it evolves over time, I'll keep you guys updated. But Once the barrel broke in after that 200 to 300 rounds, I did have a lot better success, and I will also put a video on the screen right now of me shooting this with self-defense spear 124 grain gold dot plus P ammunition. I'll let you guys watch that now.
Spear gold dot 124 grain plus P, KKM barrel, KKM comp, Glock 45. Testing with full power ammo. Had a lot of issues with 115 grain, so now we're going to test it with high spec stuff.
All right, so clearly the gun works. It just needed a little bit of a break-in period, which once again is pretty normal for a comped gun, especially when we are making such drastic changes. If you do find that you are still getting significant malfunctions, I recommend that you change either the ammunition and move to a Hutter ammo, or you may need to modify that recoil spring. This is running the stock recoil spring. However, even on KKM's website, they do recommend potentially changing to a different recoil spring if you are encountering malfunctions or you are going to be running a worse ammo more frequently. The KKM comp has been fantastic. I am easily able to get phenomenal accuracy out of the platform as well as really good splits. In all of the videos, I'm really not working too much on recoil control, which may sound crazy, but I was more so just working on trigger manipulation because this is a new firearm to me. I'm not working on shooting fast, and I'm working on making sure that I'm diagnosing the gun and seeing if there are any malfunctions, checking zero constantly, basically things that I don't need to work on recoil control. So I will have more videos in the future of me shooting this gun fast. Just know that it is a very fast shooting gun, and it's faster than what I'm showing in these videos. Also, I think my hands were just really like sweaty that day, so that probably would have been better to represent. Now, the KKM barrel does come in silver or black. The classic Roland does have their silver barrel. In fact, in my first Roland video, I had their silver coating, their stainless coating. I have their black coating here, which I'll put a picture on the screen right now. Apparently that has properties that can actually increase the FPS of your ammunition. I don't know how to test that because I don't have a $400 chronograph, but that's really fascinating to me. Maybe I'll grab one of those in the future and do some testing because I want to know if that claim is true. That seems kind of crazy to me that just that coating is going to increase your FPS by, let's say, 50 or so. But what's more important is that the black coating on a Glock just looks absolutely fantastic. If you don't think this is a gorgeous looking firearm, then I don't know what to tell you. A lot of people say Glocks are ugly. I think those people are crazy. I think Glocks are really attractive looking guns. Now, moving down the Roland, we have the X300. The X300 is also one of the most important features of the Roland Special concept. The entire compensator really became a thing because he wanted to keep carbon off the light before really even thinking about the recoil reduction qualities. The X300 is still my favorite weapon light out today. I've had many discussions with friends that are moving to, let's say, the TLR7 HLX. That is a 1000 lumen model, and that's fantastic. I'm not saying you guys can't use the HLX or you can't use a PL350. However, the X300 is a bomb-proof design with some of the best paddles, some of the best switches on the market, some of the best water resistance on the market, longevity. I love the Surefire warranty. I've had to warranty this before. This weapon light has been broke before and they took care of it. The X300 is just not going anywhere. If you are interested in other options, the Turbo is going to have a higher candela output, which is going to allow you to see a little bit farther rather than the normal Ultra, which has a little bit more of a flood, as well as the Vampire. I'd love to get a Vampire on this, and I'll probably do it eventually. The X300, though, is phenomenal, and I highly recommend it. Now, one of the most interesting parts of the Glock 45, before we really round this review out, is going to be the trigger. And I am not a trigger snob. In fact, I would say I am the opposite of a trigger snob. I think people that complain about triggers 24/7, like some friends of mine, I think those people are bad shooters. Now, I understand the benefit of having a good shooter, or having a good trigger. And a 1911 trigger brings a smile to my face. I think in the world of competition shooting with PRS rifles, so precision rifles out to 500 yards or 1,000 yards, like my Mars H is capable of, I think having a great trigger makes a lot of sense, because we're shooting at such an incredible distance that even the slightest trigger jerk is going to pull that round off target. When it comes to self-defense pistols, I think people that complain about triggers are losers. As long as your trigger is under about 10 pounds and isn't, just like the worst trigger you've ever felt, I think it's perfectly adequate, and you need to put more rounds down range. Over here, I have a GGP, or rather the MR920 trigger, which I have talked about that I like it in the past, but also that it is a little bit mushy. This trigger is perfectly adequate. It's a little mushy. It doesn't have a clear defined wall. The reason I showed this to you first is I consider this to be a decent trigger, and as you can see, it's really nothing special. It's creepy, not creepy, and a lot of people don't like it, but once again, I think those people are idiots. I showed you that first because now I want to show you the Glock 45 trigger. And I've only had one Generation 5 Glock. I'm currently evaluating a new Glock 43X build, which is kind of in between. It's their slimline generation, but this is my first Glock 45, or my Glock Generation 5, and I have been extremely impressed by the trigger, to the point where I'm curious if I got like a fluke, or if secretly Glock changed something. So I'm going to pull this up to the camera, and we're not going to take too much inspiration from Garantham, but you guys just need to see this. So I'm going to take up this creep, and then there is a wall, and you break that wall with, let's say, 4 or 5 pounds of pressure. Once again, I'm going to show you guys the creep. I'm going to show it to you from this angle, and then you break it. It's really hard to articulate just how light this trigger is. It's not like any of my other Glocks. Quite frankly, it is a phenomenal trigger, to the point where I can be as accurate with this trigger as I can with a really nice worked over 226 trigger or my 1911 trigger. This is really light. I've shot a lot of Gen 3 and Gen 4 Glocks, especially my slimline 43X, which is kind of in between that Generation 4 and Generation 5. That is a heavy trigger. I like that trigger a lot, but with that trigger, you're going to get a very clear wall and then a 7 or 8 pound pull through. This Generation 5 trigger is crazy light, which it also has a great reset. I'll show you guys here. Watch the reset. That's not bad at all. So I don't know what they have done to the Generation 5, but I am extremely impressed by the Glock trigger. Once again, if this came with a standard Generation 3 or Generation 4 trigger with a 6-7 pound pull once you reach that wall, I wouldn't care at all, because pistols, I'm shooting them in a self-defense situation under 5 yards. In a range situation, I'm shooting maybe out to like 100 meters when I'm trying to have fun, and even then, heavy triggers, I'm able to get good hits. But this trigger is so just different than what I'm used to with Glocks that I don't know how to feel. I like it a lot, and I think if Glock triggers have held you back in the past, they haven't, but if Glock triggers have held you back in the past, and you said, I don't want a Glock because it feels like a staple gun, I don't want a Glock because the trigger's really bad, I really recommend you go to a store and pull a Generation 5 trigger. It has been surprisingly nice, once again, to the point where I think I may have gotten some special trigger. It's not the Glock Performance trigger. I looked it up online. This is the normal trigger. So, and I've spent time on other Generation 5s, and they felt similar to this, but this one just feels really good. It's great. Your split times are not going to suffer by this trigger. Your accuracy is not going to suffer by this trigger. And Glock, with your Generation 6, the only thing I would like to see in the future, maybe offer different shoes, right? Maybe offer even slightly lighter triggers that have that full drop safety. But that kind of rounds out the review on the Glock 45 Roland Special concept. I don't have too much to say on this platform, and I don't have too much time on it. I have between 1,000 and 2,000 rounds, probably around that 1,500 mark. And so far, this is my favorite Roland Special that I have created. I think if Chuck Pressburg, Mr. Roland himself, did want to make a Roland today, and he talks about this on some of his podcasts, how 2011s are kind of the new Roland Special. I extremely disagree with that point. I think Glocks are still the king of the Roland Special concept. That being said, if he were to make a Roland Special today, I feel that he wouldn't use a Glock 19 sized gun. I feel like he would use a Glock 45 or a shorter slide with a longer grip, because I think it just makes sense. It just feels fantastic in the hands. My hands are a lot less cramped at the bottom. The balance of the gun is just significantly better, as well as having the greater capacity. I think, once again, I'd love to speak with you, Chuck, in person, but I think you would not be disappointed in this platform. I do want to talk about a couple really brief things before we round this video out, and that is where this build can go and other really interesting concepts that I want to experiment with on the future. First of all, where can this build go? You will notice I don't have a magwell. The Freya magwell is, well, it doesn't exist for Generation 5, but it's also just consistently out of stock. It's very hard to find, and honestly, it's not even the best magwell on the planet from what it looks like. It could be, I haven't used it, but it doesn't look that great. The SLR magwell is kind of what the Roland Special builders at ATEI will give you, and the SLR magwell looks really nice, or they give you the ZEV, but the SLR is kind of like a ZEV, but better. The SLR magwell is about $100, and honestly, I haven't seen the need to really do it. I think magwells are really, really, really cool. However, they are one of the least important aspects of the Roland Special concept. That would, of course, be the comp light and the dot. So, I could add a magwell to this, and honestly, in the future, I very well might. But that is really the only thing I'm interested in when it comes to magwells. The other thing is going to be stippling. I think stippling is ludicrously overpriced. Paying $100, $200, $300, up to $500 if you want to get certain camos and patterns is utterly ridiculous. If stippling was $50, I would do it. The Glock 45 does have ample grip. I find that the texture on the Generation 5 is perfectly adequate, especially if you are going to be concealed carrying this and you don't want it to rip up your stomach. That being said, I will probably be putting Talon grip tape on this, because I do find that, especially with great stippling or with Talon grip tape, that my recoil control is going to be a little bit better. In fact, that is one of the only things that really hold me back. I find that, first of all, comping a gun is phenomenal, but moving up to higher grip, just like textures or a larger dot, honestly helps you a lot more than you think. A compensator should be one of the last things you add to the gun. Do the other things first. But I will likely be adding Talon grip tape to this and potentially a magwell just to really burn this gun out and see what it's capable of. Now, the last thing to talk about on the Roland Special is Roland was very interested in trying different triggers. And there are a lot of great triggers on the planet. I just don't personally believe in changing my trigger on a self-defense firearm. And honestly, Glocks are known for being extremely reliable and drop safe. And changing a trigger can really change all of that. There's nothing more you can do to a gun that will completely change the reliability like changing the trigger. So this trigger will likely remain stock, as well as I already told you just how great it is. Okay. So Glock 45, I'll likely be making some changes to it. You guys will see a update video eventually. Now, other concepts I am interested in the future. 2, to be very specific. First of all, I have a 43X in the other room that will be getting the new Radian ramjet. That is going to be turned into a mini Roland Special, like the guns you see here. I have previously covered the PMM compensator in a prior review. I recommend you watch that video. That is one of the best gun builds I've ever created, probably the best gun build I ever created, and I unfortunately sold it to my friend on Discord, and I regret it every single day. So I will be putting a Radian Wamjet on it once those do exist. That should be pretty soon. I've spoken with the Radian guys. And I'm very excited for that build. The other build I'm very excited for is, I told you guys about how cool it is to have a full-size Roland Special with the full grip. What is the only thing left that you can do to this gun to make it more of an offensive handgun? The answer to that is changing the caliber. changing the cartridge. The Roland Special in 9mm is a match made in heaven. It really bridges the gap between a pistol and a pistol caliber carbine to really give you a very stable, maintainable platform. However, how do we bridge the gap between a pistol and a rifle? Well, that is something I'm very interested in, and honestly, in the next 20 or 30 years, I wouldn't be surprised if this became a lot more popular of a subject. I'll have a video discussing this in the very near future, but to that I say is 10mm. There are a couple rounds I'm very interested in. The FK Bruno round, to be precise. That round looks really cool, and I wish more guns adopted that caliber, especially Glock. But 10mm is about twice the power of 9mm. With 9mm, you're looking at between 300 and 400 foot-pounds of energy, generally speaking. 10mm, you can get 600, 700, 800 rounds of energy on target. Now, the big downside of 10mm is, first of all, cost. It's very expensive. And second of all, recoil. It can really, those plus P rounds from, let's say, Buffalo Bore, those will put some hair on your chest. Those have a lot of recoil. But guess what? KKM makes some really aggressive compensators. And to my knowledge, they make 10mm compensators. So, in the future, I'm telling you right now, I don't know when it will happen, but I will be making a 10mm Roland Special, and honestly, that gun really excites me. I think 9mm is perfectly adequate in what it does, but if I can carry a much larger cartridge and also get, let's say I can bring the recoil down from uncomped 10 to uncomped 9mm plus P, so a little bit snappy, that will be a mission successful. Because right now, this shoots like a 380 ACP. It's so soft. So I'm very interested in that concept. I will be doing that in the future. And 10mm has kind of become a lot more popular recently. And I'm really excited to give it a go. So that's all I have to say about the Roland Special. I tried to make this a 10-minute video. Of course, that didn't happen. You guys know me far too well. I will actually be collaborating with HoloSun in the very near future on some really cool sites, and my first ever company collaboration where they provide me products. As well as I have a lot of really cool products in the future I will be talking about, namely Night Vision, my Mars H build, my Glock 43X Roland Special, a EPS carry review, so many great things to come. Please comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, quarrels, anything with what I said, and please like and subscribe. I hate to be the one to say that because you hear it everywhere, but YouTube does a really terrible job of promoting my videos because it is a gun channel, and of course I am so small. Every single like, every single subscription, and every single comment you guys send me, it really just completely makes my day. So please like and subscribe, and we'll get this channel somewhere someday. Thanks for stopping in to Armadillo Armament, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.